Thank you for joining us today on Conscious Leadership Live. Hi, everyone. From all around the world, my name is Mark Samuel, and today my partner in delivering workshops on facilitating personal transformation and virtual event mastery, Licia Rester, is here to join me. And we are here joined by our special guest, Morgan MacDonald. Morgan is the CEO, owner of Paper Raven Books, and will be sharing her own experience with applying the virtual event mastery methodology and conscious leadership techniques and approaches in this event today in this podcast. Morgan began her career in academia as a sociologist. That in itself is amazing. I just want you all to keep that in mind as you hear Morgan respond to the questions we have for her, but soon found the entrepreneurial pull to take her skills as a researcher, writer, teacher, and leader into building a publishing company from the ground up. With 15 years experience in writing and publishing and editing and publishing books, Morgan leads the Paper Raven Books team in developing the best practices for publishing successfully in the modern digital age. Thank you, Morgan, for joining us today. I can't wait to get into this particular podcast.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Licia. Super excited to be here with you guys.
It's so great to have you here, Morgan. It's your journey is such a powerful one. And we can't wait to dive into it and just see kind of behind the scenes of how your own conscious business leadership has served you and all of those people that you serve. So, Mark, should we just jump right on in?
Yeah, let's get into it because there is this huge, in my mind, chasm between sociologist and entrepreneur. So, yeah, Licia, go ahead and get us started on this. I'm curious.
Yes, me too. So, speaking of that, that transformation in and of itself, Morgan, what was really the hardest thing about starting your own business? And how did you need to transform yourself first and foremost in order to support the growth of your business?
Yeah. So I think that as once we start really growing something, we realize that every time you transform or reach a new level, like there's just the next one, right ahead of you that you're looking
Yeah.
at. And since Mark has already expressed curiosity around the sociology piece, that was really one of the first major transformations that I remember being in that stage of life where I was following not what was prescribed, but what was easy for me to see the path.
Mm.
And so I was always a great student, high school editor of the newspaper and
Wow.
great, grades in college and undergraduate theses. And my professor said, you would make a great professor. And I was like, well, that's a fantastic compliment. I would like to be a professor. And so, you go through the whole rigmarole of standardized tests and letters of recommendation and applications. And my then fiance was applying for law school at the same time. And so you sort of get caught up in all of the next steps and landed in a great doctoral program. And
Wow.
it was great on paper. And I was in the doctoral program, like trying to, get my head around like what I really wanted to devote my life to in research and teaching. And before I knew it, I was not doing any of my own research and was only helping other people with their research. So I was helping them with their journal articles and theses and dissertations and, undergraduate students, junior faculty, particularly, I was really able to get there and help them with their writing. And then after a couple of years, I was like, wait, I'm not actually making any progress really on my own stuff. We were, my husband, he became my husband, right? We were going through a lot of personal changes too. He was looking at graduating law school. We were looking at moving to New York City. And I was like, you know what?
Wow.
Actually, I don't really need to be here. Like I kind of fell into this path because it seemed easy, and now I'm here. And it was a tough moment to say everything I've invested up to this point, I'm actually just going to walk away. I
Wow.
don't even know
Wow.
what I'm going to do next, but I don't think that it's for me to get a PhD and become a professor. So I left with a master's. I did go on in New York City to teach at a college there, Malloy College out on Long Island. Taught sociology for a few years there, and just realized it wasn't for me, but didn't know what was next. And we were talking before we kind of
Wow.
went live today. What is a conscious leader? And Licia, you really brought to my attention, it's that purpose drivenness to want to serve others and to know that it's about more than just yourself, right? And I didn't know what that looked like for me at that time, 20 something, and actually was at that point pregnant with my first baby, and no, in New
Wow.
York had already had one baby, pregnant with a second baby, and I just felt like, whoa, life is happening really fast, and I'm not in the driver's seat here. I'm sort of along for the ride. And so I think there was quite a few years there where I was really just trying to be open and receive, like, what is mine to do? And
Mm,
that is a question that you've brought to my attention. I don't think I asked that question in those words, but it was really that question of, like, why am I here? And I didn't have a good answer.
Oh,
And so all I kept doing was just like the next thing that seemed to make sense. So it was a lot of freelance editing, writing coaching. It had worked before. So let me just go back to those previous clients, ask for referrals, and just growing that kind of side hustle basically was what it was for quite a
I,
few years.
I have to point out just a couple of things that I'm hearing because it's so important, and I hear so many people have difficulty with what you're talking about right now. And let me be clear about this. So first of all, a conscious leader, a transformational leader, has to almost begin by having that courage to
mm,
be able to drop and let go of the plan and the past to open themselves up to whatever the new is. And that takes a great deal of inner courage to make that happen. And but you did something in the way you made that happen that I think is really important. I want everybody, especially our younger audience, to pay attention to this. It didn't mean that in that abyss where you stop the old and to identify and find your purpose, it didn't become your purpose to find your purpose. You actually used whatever talents you had and made those useful and made that your purpose until the bigger purpose came through. And I see people a lot of times check out,
mm.
like, oh, it's not my purpose, therefore I'm not going to do anything. Or I'm going to get a job doing, a waitress, let's just say, and nothing wrong with waitressing if that's your
I
purpose,
was a
but
barista for a stint, so I did that
there
too.
there you go. See, but and all of that's good because it's all part of the experimentation and trying things and living life. But I still heard you say very clearly, I kept coaching people, I kept supporting people, I kept using being a coach and teacher all during the time before it kind of settled in for what you were going to do. Is that pretty accurate? Does that
It is.
seem?
It is.
Yeah,
And I mean, young naivete, like I wasn't doing that on purpose, right? But I think
right.
it's interviews like this where we can sort of take a moment, listen to somebody else's journey, and pause and self-reflect and say, am I really open to what might be next for me? Am I using my skills, even if I don't know where they're taking me? Am I at least using them to the best of my ability inside of this immediate context? I think is a really good personal check-in for all of us. Licia, did you want to jump in with something?
You are very intuitive, Morgan. Yes, I did. You heard me yes, exactly. Obviously, this topic of purpose is really near and dear to my heart. And the other thing that I'm so glad you pointed that out, Mark, because it really is one of these fallacies,
Yeah.
which really, again, points to an outer reference to purpose rather than what I would
Yes.
call a soul purpose, which is it can take many forms, but often what the through line is service, is supporting others in an authentic and heartfelt way, which actually circles back to our kind of working definition of conscious business leadership, is to have the awareness that there is a greater level to this game and that we have an opportunity to serve regardless of what our role is, our function is, And so that's what I'm also hearing from your journey as you look back on it, Morgan, that we actually don't need to have some pristine vision of our purpose. What we can just be is in service, and that actually becomes the biggest purpose. And then we follow that flow. We
Yes.
follow the breadcrumbs or whatever, as you have done, to one thing leads to another, and then we find ourselves in more and more alignment of what the outer functions and our outer roles are with really that inner calling to serve.
Yes, yes, that's so true. And I didn't know that I was starting a business at the time that I was doing all this freelance editing and writing coaching, but there was a point at which I did join a business program, an online program, and I realized, "Oh my gosh, I know nothing about business, but actually I'm really enjoying this." And
Mhm.
gave myself a little bit of rein, a little bit of permission to start thinking about what would it look like to grow a business. And so, at each of those um, growth points or planes, you could almost think of them. I do recall moments where it was like, holy moly, like I'm going to have to make a big leap here. Like, I in 2013 is when I took that first business course and realized I want to think about a publishing company. I don't know what that would look like, but that sounds fun to build. Didn't know how that was going to come to be. 2015 realized I had enough clients with me that I could actually bring team underneath me
Ah,
to help with all the projects. And that's the same year that I decided to write and publish a book based on what I'd learned from working with clients directly. So 2015 is actually when we became Paper Raven Books, sort of
Mhm.
officially, and working with books in that way. And then in 2018, 2019, we went from just working with nonfiction books, how to lessons learned, business angle, or self help or spiritual, like those kinds of books were our bread and butter for years. I That's what I was comfortable with. And then as we expanded and the team had more capacity, we were able to take on more fiction books and
mhm.
memoirs and other types of books that I was no longer working on personally, but the team was working on. And so those were some of the when I look back at our progression over time, it has been this slow getting a bigger and bigger radius of people that we are helping, and my personal responsibility of helping those individuals is lessened because I'm actually supporting now the team that is helping those clients. So now we're doing 50 books a year, and we're
Wow.
right up on the cusp of a seven-figure business that uh, started in at a tiny desk in Brooklyn, and now we've moved to Colorado since, and we have 4 kids, and so life has gone on. But I am no longer the person really working hand in hand with those folks. Instead, I'm creating the larger system that is supporting all of these clients in sort of their transformation. So it's wild what what can happen when you follow those breadcrumbs that you talked about, Mark.
Well, you just said something though that's really hard for people to do. And I work with leaders in all different size companies and all around the world. And one of the biggest challenges is that when you're used to doing the work,
Mhm.
serving the clients, what was the transition you had to make inside of you to actually let go of that to make your focus on my client is really my team.
Mhm.
Like my job is to really empower my team and give up control. The hardest thing for entrepreneurs is giving up control. They want to make all the decisions. They want to do all the work. They want to come in and micromanage. How did you make that transition
Yeah.
um, to really let go?
some of the some of the things that helped me to make that transition um, were those moments when I could very plainly look at myself and say, Morgan, you're not doing this perfectly. You're screwing
Mm,
this up project up. You didn't catch every single error in that manuscript before it went back to the author. Why would you expect someone else to be perfect? Like, and
wow.
so that those have been the moments where I have tended to take on so much work that I am no longer doing my best work. And then it's like, Well, you've got two options at this point. Either revert back and do less work or bring someone else in because you're already kind of screwing it up. So like
Yes.
bring somebody else in. They're not going to do any worse. And more than likely, they're going to do better than you are. So having those like real sort of tough talks with myself and saying like, look, I know that in your best moment, you can do great work, but right now you're not actually doing your best work. You're floundering a little bit here. And that feeling of like, oh my gosh, it's too much. I'm drowning. It's like, I don't know why some of us have a tendency
Yes.
to put ourselves in that situation. But once you're in that situation, it's like you got two options: either reverse back and do less or bring somebody else in, because it's not going to get any better until someone else is in there with you.
Well, I
I
love that. Honest self-awareness, self-reflection, and willing to own your own accountability, mistakes, whatever, to not be perfect. That, again, is such a demonstration of conscious business leadership. Lisa, I
absolutely.
cut you off. What were you going
I,
to ask and
You
say?
just took the words out of my mouth, Mark. Was going to say the exact same thing. The level of self honesty and your ability to look at yourself with objectivity.
Yeah,
I mean, what a powerful quality to have. And it's easy to talk about it, but when we're all in it,
yeah,
and especially in situations where like the stress is over here, our tendency is to revert into kind of a more defensive posture, even with our own selves. So the fact that you could take that and leverage those moments of self-realization and say, okay, this is what's going on. And I can only guess, because it's wonderful for me to hear this articulated so clearly. I can only guess that people who are, you know, watching this podcast, listening to the podcast, that's a big takeaway, I think,
yeah.
for all of us. I actually wanted to go back to something that Morgan said uh, a few minutes ago that I never knew, but is quite appropriate for this conversation. You said, if I heard you correctly, that it was an online course that actually tipped it for you, that became your inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was my first experience of an online course. And, I will get into like virtual event mastery method and all of these sorts of things that we've really grown like as a society and as a culture of what we're able to provide to people in virtual events. In 2013, it was still very new. It was like a video was dropped once a week and there was a dial in like telephone Q&A session.
Wow.
Like, which worked great for me. I had two little ones in our little tiny Brooklyn apartment. I didn't want to be on video, like that worked for me. I remember we didn't even, maybe I had headphones at that time, but it was, you plug them in, you stick the phone in your pocket and you're wandering around getting, making a grilled cheese sandwich and listening to the Palace Summit. Like I was, that was the type of program that was, and it gave me just like a glimpse into like, oh, this is what it means to grow a business. Like I had never heard, I didn't have access to that, even though I was living in New York City, where there's, some of the best universities in the world. Those weren't available to me, or it felt like there was a big hurdle. There was a big, divide between my current situation or my situation at that time and being able to attend one of those universities, because it was like my husband works crazy hours in the city and we've got young kids. I'm teaching out on Long Island, but the online program, I can do that. Like it's my foot in the door, and that really kind of opened up this whole new world for me.
Wow. Wow. So how, Mark, I'm just kind of jumping around
Yeah.
here. How, given that was kind of a touchstone for you, what are your views currently of using e-learning both for your own clients and just generally speaking? How is that lining up for you and your business?
We are entirely online, distributed remote team. I'm in Denver, Colorado. We have team members in Atlanta, Georgia, and Illinois, and California, and I mean, sort of all over the place. We have one team member in Canada, a couple in Venezuela. So we're all over the place. It works now because publishing books is also online, right? It's Word documents and InDesign files and uploading things and having the printer send you a copy of the book and that sort of thing. So it all works. And when we are with our clients, it's also virtual, right? So whether we are hosting just a 1 hour session where we're talking about book marketing, or whether we're doing, maybe with a group of authors, maybe we're doing a one-on-one check-in through Zoom. I've done entire 3-day boot camps, especially following y'all's prescriptions on how to run a larger virtual event, where it was interactive, and I had, 85 people in a Zoom room with me and a couple of team members helping me to manage it, and small group discussions. So we've really kind of we're trying to run the gamut on how we can best serve people online, because everyone's got, different lives, different schedules, different locations. And so if we can find a way to work together, that I feel like that just opens up a lot of possibilities for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. I mean, it is amazing. We couldn't even have this conversation, I don't think, 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
the fact that you've created such a business, and how is it for you as a purpose-driven leader managing people in virtual locations? Like how do you keep the team energy? Were there any keys or any advice you have about really making sure that the quality is there, the teamwork is there, the interdependency is there? Like, did you run into any challenges at any time, and what did you do to overcome them?
I mean, I feel like every day is a new batch of challenges. I think in some ways, there are online systems related to, let's say, project management, for instance, that sort of keep everybody on the same page. We should have, calendars where we kind of know whose book is launching when, and what are all the various to-do items that must be done by who, or whom, I guess, by what date, and so like there are systems that help you manage those sorts of things just to make sure things get done. We could talk about communication, which for us a lot of times happens on Slack between team members or inside of our project management system. And then really there is an element of needing to also see someone's face and hear their voice to feel like something real is happening. It can't all just be text based. And so that's something that we've really been helped by the advent of Zoom into the mainstream. It was really only a few years ago that we were still doing everything by telephone, a conference line. And then we finally moved over to Zoom. And then a couple of years later, the pandemic happened, and everyone got on Zoom, it felt like. And now people are like, oh, it doesn't have to just be Zoom. It can be StreamYard or whatever, it can be other video platforms. But that has helped our relationship with our authors so much more, to be able to, we have regular check-ins with each individual author. Every week I have open office hours for the team that they can pop in. Every week I have a marketing discussion with our authors who we work with. As I said, we occasionally do like larger events like the 3-day boot camps, and it just helps us all to feel like we're part of a real community. Like we're all doing something together, even though it's individual authors publishing books and our team just helping them. The ability for everyone to log into a virtual platform and see each other's faces and get to know each other, and people can ask questions and they can answer each other's questions real time. There's so much more of a real relationship between our authors and between our team members. It used to feel like it was all me because it was me on the phone with one person at a time. Now we have these video platforms where we have, 30 folks on a call, or as I mentioned, the 85 on a 3-day boot camp. And it just feels like, oh, I'm part of something. A real community is what it feels like to us.
That's awesome.
And it really sounds like without the virtual component, that aspect of the community aspect of your business would not be, or would have a much lesser role.
I think that's right. I mean, we could get the things done, right? We had checklists and calendars long before we ever needed Zoom, right? We could get the things done. We could email back and forth if we really had to. But that was just getting the tasks done. right? But a business and building a community is so much more. It has to be relational. And I just don't know that, these are text-based mediums, whether it's email or project management or Slack or even a, Facebook group or something like that. I don't know that that's enough to really feel like it's part of my identity that I am part of this community. I think that is helped greatly by these virtual events.
Mm.
And speaking of those virtual events for a moment, what would you say are, like especially when you're talking about the boot camp and maybe other programs that you're doing with your clients, what are the biggest keys for creating that engaging virtual program that you think has contributed to the growth of your, both your company, but also the growth of your authors or the growth of the people that are attending your boot camps and programs?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something I've certainly talked with both of you about, previously, Mark and Licia. But it's I think it is part curriculum, right? Instructional design is important. Like having a roadmap of what we're going to do together during this time, like why we're all here, is really reassuring for everyone. It helps to make sure that people are getting real value from giving of their time and energy and attention to being at this event. But then the other is letting it be a little bit more flexible. And this is something that I've really learned from both of you is allowing for that space to kind of breathe in the event, that it doesn't have to be so completely lockstep, that you want to allow for space to for things to settle, for people to be able to do like a visualization exercise or open Q&A or smaller breakout rooms where they're not just being flooded with information sort of in a passive way, but they're really getting to open up and speak, or maybe write, or ask questions and get answers from different people, not just one person. All of those have been extremely helpful in giving people a reason to not only come to our events but stay at our events.
Powerful. And, I just want to reflect to the group that what Morgan is talking about, we have what we call the 5 pillars of virtual event mastery. And so the first pillar is, of course, content design, the classic educational aspects of the event. But what Morgan's really talking about more is pillar 2, which is the experience design. And how do you, because of the inherent sterility of the virtual environment, how do you put a focus on the actual experience that participants will have to support their engagement, as Mark asked before, to support that ongoing engagement throughout whatever the length of that program is? And it sounds like, Morgan, you have done a lot of focus on really cultivating the community, which is part of the experience, as well as the different activities that support engagement.
It's an ongoing learning experience, but the great thing is that we have these tools available to us now. And as Mark mentioned, they weren't 10 years ago. And so I feel like have been handed this big toolbox and we're like, what does what? What do I do with this? So it's all an experiment, right? It's all a big game basically. But it's fun.
It's so great and inspiring to hear how you've done this, because again, you're so purpose driven, and yet at the same time you're very practical.
Yes.
And very organized, and really thinking of how all the parts come together and don't depend on you, but really empower your people to be part of it. And do you do anything that that engages your team to come up with ideas to course correct, or how do you foster that? Is that something that's also a purpose for you with your organization?
I think that's something I'm growing into, Mark, to be really honest. I think it was easier for me to conceptualize, okay, here are clients. Here's the objective of us working with a client. We want a published book that is well received. Like, what are all the steps that get us to, published launch book that's out in the world? Okay, we can conceive of that. We can create all the checklists and all the things and plug team members in to do their various pieces. And okay, the clients have questions. How do we support the clients and all their questions, right? So that part for me was like an easier challenge to tackle. But then suddenly, in order to serve 50 clients at a time, you're like, oh, now we have like 8 team members on retainer plus other team members who are, project contractors. And to be honest, I was not, and probably still am not, like the greatest communicator. Anyone who's tried to send me an email is like, I'm not sure Morgan actually checks her email. I should probably send her a text message, as Lucia does. Just letting you know, Morgan, there's an email in your inbox waiting for you. Because I will totally ghost. Like, that is and maybe this is part of being a conscious leader. I don't know. I'm working on this vocabulary. Being a conscious leader is like, admitting where I am. Maybe not living up to everything I could be. But I will get head down in a project and like, I won't talk to my team for days, which is maybe not so totally reassuring for them. So some of the things that we've really tried to implement, especially as the team has gotten bigger in the last couple of years, is, I think I mentioned, open office hours once a week. That was so difficult for me to commit to. I don't like to commit to weekly meetings. There are very few weekly meetings on my calendar, but I was like, okay, I can do this one. Wednesdays, I'm probably going to be in town. Like, I will put that on my calendar. Some other things that we've done is a monthly all hands meeting, right? And it's on Zoom. And I show up with things that I want to present. And then I ask my main director of production, Karen, I ask her if she will help come up with some like questions and things like that will engage the room, right? And so some of those types of things we are just getting really into practice. We had a Christmas party this past year. Virtual Christmas party.
Wow.
And again, it was less that like I needed to plan it and more that I needed to give permission for the thing to be planned. Karen was like, I'm happy to host the virtual Christmas party, but can we please do something? Can I have like a budget allocation for like prizes? And I was like, sure, like let's have fun. And so things like that we're getting better at, but I won't say that is something that comes as naturally to my leadership style. So we're working on it.
Well, it may not come naturally. I just think your nature really actually picked up on something that's really important. Find the things that other people love to do. Find their zones of genius and allow them to go with it. Rather than micromanaging someone when it's your zone of excellence, but not your zone of genius, hand it over to the person who's got the zone of genius. I mean, and you sort of just naturally did that. But if leaders did that more, and really reflected to each person that works for them, what is your unique zone of genius? What is the thing that you do that's like breathing for you that the rest of us can't do, that you might even take for granted? We want to use that more and find ways to use that more, which they're going to have more joy with. And some of that's going to come from the ideas they share, like this person, but it's something to actually look out for, because then we're leveraging everybody on our team.
Yeah. And so if you know someone who likes to host a Zoom meeting and put together like, icebreakers, it's like, please feel free, schedule Zoom meetings, come up with icebreakers, hand out prizes, like have fun.
I really think this piece that you've just brought forward, Mark, is so powerful inside of the context of conscious business leadership. Because what is an aspect of a conscious leader? To bring the best out from others. And what's really interesting, Morgan, is that you began really in education in a way. And the root word of education is educare, which is to bring out from within. So that aspect that you have, that you kind of naturally do, which is to bring out the best in others, is so powerful as someone who leads teams. And Mark, I love this idea that you have. You could throw like a superhero genius party, where everybody kind of explores together, and then other team members reflect to that person. Because often what we've found, Mark and I, is that the innate gifts we have, we often don't even know, because they're so innate. It's like we don't even realize that it's a gift. We just kind of assume that everybody has it, and so it's kind of just the natural.
Can I ask for coaching here real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're trying something new with the team where we are doing 360-degree reviews. So Google Forms, totally anonymous, asking everyone to fill out one about themselves. That one's not anonymous. We want their name on it. But then they can fill out reviews about every other team member. And one of the questions we asked was, what does this person do well? So in my mind right now, I'm like, what do I do with that information? Like, I'm going to get it in a Google form. Should I like have a meeting and we all like talk about each person one at a time? Like, what should I do with that?
It's a great
Well,
question.
it is a great question, and it somewhat depends on your team and the environment of the team, because some teams are really safe and some, or let me say it that a little differently, the members of the teams feel safe and others are a little bit more, I don't know what people are going to say about me and all of that. And I think the first thing you're going to want to do, to be really honest, is look at the data.
Yeah.
And look at where is there a uh, discrepancy in scores, where someone either views themselves really low and everyone views them high, or someone views themselves really high and others are low, or, and the thing to watch out for is everyone views this person, kind of average or good, but one person gave them all low scores. So that you begin to see where might there be either bias or what have you. And then what I like to do when there's is take the numbers that are in the extreme and actually interview each person, not just about the scores for themselves, but how did they score others? Like, what was behind? If you scored it lower than everybody else on the team for this person, what was that about? And do you recognize that there might be a bias there or some kind of a conflict that's actually nobody knows about? So I wouldn't bring the team together first. I would have that sorted out to even see if we can bring the team together.
Okay.
And I would address the individual possible biases, or, like I had one person when I did this that I counted up all the weak scores, and this one person represented, if there were 25 weak scores, 13 of them were there giving them to other people.
Wow.
Well, you may see the world through judgmental eyes. Just a
Interesting.
clue. While
Okay.
other people scored people that really had lower score. Oh no, this is a 7 out of 7. It's like they got the top score. Well, how do you see that? Like, why did you give that person a 7? So I actually did interviews based on the extremes, and then saw where did they see themselves relative to the other feedback, to see whether it was
Okay.
within the range or extreme positive or negative. So I'm always talking about all of it, not just you relative to other people's feedback. It's you, how did you give the feedback as well as, and it was, honestly, it was I've only done this recently, and it was one of literally the best things I've ever done. It surfaced everything that was not getting surfaced up to that point.
Wow, that's super helpful. Thank you. Lisa, do you have other can you coach me?
Well, I also love the idea, because I have a little bit more sense of your company, having been one of your clients, very happily so. Um, so, the other thing that's really what might be really fun is to have more of a conscious cultural quality of seeing others' strengths and acknowledging it. And really, my inspiration for this is my work with Mark. We kind of fell into this really fun game that we play and have been playing with each other now for the entire time that we've been partnering as designers and facilitators. Is when we catch a geniusy in the other person, we call it out.
Cool.
So very early on, we set up kind of really it was unwritten kind of cultural norm for us of one, a lot of acknowledgement, as well as pointing out what might be blind spots for the other person and what they do really well. And even just as recent as a conversation yesterday, like this is part of this is really, I would say, one of the most consistent aspects of our communication with each other. And what I think that has done is that we were just talking about this yesterday, it has supported us in creating a safe and encouraging environment where we both really shine and we know the other person wants us to shine. So
Mhm.
it creates this really incredibly positive, powerful, supportive environment. So that's one thought, is to kind of bring that forward. The other thing is, because I know you're really good at analyzing data from your background as well as from, you do it all the time when it comes to marketing in your business. You could actually create buckets of strengths, of
Mm.
your team.
Yeah.
Say, look
Yeah.
at what we have. Look at our top qualities,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
let's
Yeah.
let's brainstorm how we could use those qualities to either address things that we want to do more in the future. Like, how do we really leverage these qualities, both individually and collectively, in innovative new ways for our business, for our clients, or even as ways to solve issues that we know that we have right now.
Okay, cool. So I'm
Wow.
definitely gonna take away the one-on-one conversations first. I think you're right, Mark. That happens first. And Licia, I can imagine having like a group meeting where no one else is on the hook, but like
Right.
I'm really bringing forward this idea of like I want to encourage us to have a call out culture of acknowledgement. And so
Yeah.
in order to kick this off, I'm going to go one by one around the Zoom room and just like call out, acknowledge everybody. And then when we wrap, like here's all the buckets of all the things, and in the future, if you see a colleague who is doing something amazing, like call out, acknowledge, or we'll have to come up with a hashtag for this.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but make it, take the pressure off, right, is kind of what I'm
Yes.
saying. Is like have those one-on-one conversations where you can go really deep with that person, and then in the group try to make it fun is
Exactly. Exactly. And you could even do a mini exercise where people just select, they partner up and then they share, one thing that they really admire of the other person, one thing they admire for themselves in themselves, or,
Mm.
and, different,
Yeah.
different ways that you can configure this to kind of kickstart what you mean when you say a culture of acknowledgement. Well, what does that
Yes.
actually look like?
Yeah.
And so for you to model those kinds of good behaviors as the leader of
Hmm.
this, and it can show up in emails, it can show up on Slack, it can show up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you guys.
Sure.
Well, and it's I'm so glad you asked the question and even got that process started. And I have to say, you know, Lisa and I have such a joy in working together. It was magical when we first got together and did our programs on facilitating transformation and then took it into virtual event mastery. But I have to tell you, I'm an old guy at this point, and Licia, in many respects, was one of the first people that would reflect back some of what I would call my zones of genius that I was completely unaware of. And I mean,
Wow.
totally unaware. And it's not like I'm not self-aware, but unfortunately, I'm much more self-aware on the things that I don't like and the things that I can improve.
Yeah.
And I sort of took for granted many things that come easy and natural because I just do it. So I'm assuming everyone does it. And because I didn't have to struggle to do it, I just assume, oh, that's just every human being does that. And literally until I was getting feedback from Licia. And quite honestly, it's totally changed the way I show up and the way I do
Mm.
things. And even the way we partner is many times based on whose zone of genius is it. And
Mm.
it's so efficient and effective to do that. and,
Yeah.
and it's leveraging our strengths, like, the way each of us breathe different. Oh yeah, okay, well, just breathing, I'll take that on. For me, wouldn't be breathing for Licia, and vice versa. Like, what
Right.
would be painfully difficult for me, Licia has a zone of genius, and it's like, oh, thank God.
And for sure vice versa. And one thing I want to add to, Morgan, is be sure that people, that you invite people to do that with you. So that just because you're
Yes.
the leader doesn't mean you have to take on kind of the mantle of modesty. Like, don't go like that would be a fallacy in this
Mm,
approach,
mhm.
because you want to also know more and more what how people receive you.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I want to say, just kickstarting this, you are brilliant at systems,
Mhm.
brilliant at designing systems. And that's just something, like, maybe nobody, maybe a lot of people have told you that, maybe you know about that, but it's just one of these kind of things that just could easily not be acknowledged. And it's not just about the acknowledgement, it's about recognizing it so you can go, oh, that's really true,
But if I have a
or
Zoom room full of people saying nice things to me, I'm going to start crying.
exactly. Now you know
Exactly.
why I have tears rolling
I
down
don't
my
know how I
eyes
want to
so
do that,
often.
Alicia. I think you're gonna. I would rather be the one just saying nice things to other people and then
I
end
know that.
meetings.
I
Well,
know.
and and really what's so cool about that is you've got on one hand that ability with systems, and on another hand, you are amazingly articulate and
Yes.
quick
So crying.
to be
Stop it.
clear. I mean, it's just beautiful to watch every time. I mean, I was so excited. Alicia will tell you, I was just so excited when we were talking about having you on the call because I go, oh my gosh, you are just amazingly clear and your thinking is so good and articulate. It just is so it's always inspiring to me. Just the clarity is
Thank you.
inspiring to me.
I'm not going to
Well,
deflect. I'm just going to say thank you.
good. Excellent. And along
Well,
those lines,
yeah.
I actually do want to say, if what would be the best way for other very fortunate people to get to know you, to know more about your business, your services, and how they could actually work with you? What would that look like?
So our home on the internet is paperravenbooks.com, and we help people write, publish, market books. So we have expanded to the point that we work with nonfiction and memoir and fiction. We love trilogies, especially because how we can launch them in a rapid release kind of fashion. But yeah, so paperravenbooks.com has kind of all of our info. This is, being put out to the socials. So I'll try to come in and comment. And so you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those places. If I don't respond, it's because my head is in a corner somewhere working on a project. I'll pop back up someday and say hi. Yeah, I would
And,
love to. I would love to get in contact with folks.
and what makes your approach different? Because there's so many other publishers out there, from the big guys like Penguin to, more self-public. What makes you guys different?
So we are self-publishing services, which means that we are partnering with the author to publish their book. So rather than, we are not buying the content from the author or licensing the content from the author and producing our own book from their content, which is pretty much like, maybe that's a callous way to sort of talk about traditional publishing, but that's how it is. In traditional, you pitch to the publisher. If they like it, they will license the content from you. They'll take the words and they'll put them into a book and they'll sell the book and they'll give you a piece of it, right? Which is great.
Small piece of it.
There are
Small piece.
advantages,
Just to be
traditional
clear.
publisher, the big ones can make a phone call and get you into Barnes and Noble, but that is becoming a less and less effective way to sell books,
That's
particularly
right.
post-pandemic kind of world. So what we specialize in is helping, especially new debut authors, find their readership online in particular. So we're looking at the Amazon algorithm. We're looking at where readers hang out online, podcasts and blogs and social media places to get the book in front of the right types of readers. And at the end of the day, it is the author's book. So the author maintains the creative vision, the legal rights, the profits. It's also the author's readership. It's not our readers, right? We're helping them to connect with their own readers. And so in that way, we're talking about transformation. I mean, when we start working with an author, we're working with them at like the beginnings of the book. What's your message? What's your mission? What's your story? And we're walking them through this whole process all the way to publishing and launching. And, there are about 6 different, existential crises that are going to happen in between. I've got an idea from a book to I'm a published author, and then a couple more that happen after. But we're really supporting them in that whole process. And yes, we're giving them best practices, but it's also all like custom to them as the author. What is their mission? Who are their readers? And we're really helping to kind of bring them together. And the book is just one way that they're connecting with their people. So we just facilitate that whole process.
That is awesome. Well, I'm so grateful that you've been on this call with us, and the level of depth that you brought us to, and really specific good tools and advice about leadership. And gosh, Alicia, it's just so fun to partner with you, and doing our first podcast together has just been outstanding. And I just love the education that you bring into it and the
Oh,
clarity.
thank you.
You guys have just been, just rock stars for me. I just love this. We could go on forever. To our audience, this is definitely one you'll probably want to re-listen to. So even if you were live, or whether you're hearing it for the first time in a recorded version, this is the kind of thing where you'll want to come back and lift some of the jewels, because Morgan was fantastic at giving very practical things that you can do to grow your business, shape your business, work with other people in your business, and really stay purpose driven within all of that, and model that self-awareness that is so key if we're going to be sustainable in business long term as conscious business leaders. So
Well,
thank
before
you.
we wrap, I hear you rapping, Mark. And before we
I
wrap, I
am
just
rapping.
want to give you guys some credit here, because what you two, Mark and Licia, what you do is you create these containers that are both rich in curriculum, right? We're learning new things. I've done virtual event mastery method with both of you. That method has been extremely important in me being able to host some of these virtual events, especially for our audience, and even generate revenue. I mean, I've generated more than 6 figures in revenue just on some of the events that I did following the training with you. So it's real on the ground. And you give us a space for our own transformation. It's as you're helping us to transform the lives of our clients and our team, you're really giving us the space to reflect. And so you've given me this opportunity so many times. I mean, every time I have a conversation with the both of you, I'm going to new areas of vocabulary, but also self-awareness. And so thank you, both of you, for hosting these conversations and really holding these containers that are safe and self-reflective and shared with everyone in this kind of vulnerable way. So thank you both. You're doing amazing work, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and it's a joy, Mark, as always. I just like finding excuses for us to play together, as well as you, Morgan. I mean, it's just play for me, and fun, and also just revelatory as well. Like, what could be better than that? Having fun
Yes.
and growing and serving and supporting others. So yeah, more to come on that.
Yes, awesome. All right, and thank you so much, Morgan. We really appreciate that. Well, we've come to the end here, but it's not the real end, because you have to join Lisa and I again on April 8th. Write that down, April 8th, for our next episode of this special virtual event mastery series with a very special guest, innovation designer and coach, Dr. Cynthia Golan. She is amazing. I mean, I look at her truly as one of my mentors when it comes to exquisite design and development of training programs. She is amazing. I always learn when I am with her. So, and she's just so delightful anyway. It's
Yes.
like Morgan. We're all like one big happy family. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna rock your socks when it comes to new ideas. So please join us on April 8th. And in the meantime, thanks for joining us today. Have a great weekend that's coming up for all of us. No matter where you are in the world, you're either in it or gonna be in it soon. And again, thank you for joining.